The smell of cinnamon and pine filled the church hall as I adjusted the nativity scene for what felt like the 100th time. Strings of fairy lights twinkled from every corner, reflecting off polished floors, but their cheer didn't reach me. The annual Christmas charity event was supposed to embody joy and generosity, yet I felt weighed down by something far heavier than garlands and ornaments. Dad's booming voice echoed from the adjoining room, directing volunteers and reminding me that tonight wasn't just about the season, it was about upholding our family's image. His expectations loomed like the steeple outside, a constant shadow in my life. I straightened a shepherd figurine and stepped back, trying to focus, but my heart wasn't in it. Then the door swung open. At first, I didn't recognize him. His confident stride and easy smile belonged to someone who didn't belong here, someone who had escaped. He carried himself with a presence that filled the room without trying. But then his gaze locked on me, and I froze. "Eli," he said, his voice warm and familiar. And it clicked. Jordan. The last time I'd seen him, we were kids, running through these very halls, his laugh echoing like bells. But this wasn't the boy I remembered. This was a man who'd seen the world and returned with something I couldn't quite name. "Jordan," I managed, my voice catching. "It's been a while." "A while, try years," he replied, crossing the room in a few easy strides. "You've hardly changed, though. Still the same solemn Eli." I laughed awkwardly, fiddling with the edge of my sleeve. "And you look different. Different. Try amazing," he teased, flashing a grin. His confidence unsettled me, but it was impossible not to be drawn in. He leaned casually against the table, scanning the decorations. "This place hasn't changed much, either. Still feels like stepping into a Christmas card." His words made me glance around, seeing the hall through his eyes. The wreaths, the ribbons, the carefully arranged poinsettias. It all felt so small suddenly, so safe, so unlike him. "Well," I said, clearing my throat, "welcome back." "Thanks," he said, looking at me with an intensity that made my stomach flip. "Though I didn't expect you'd still be here." It wasn't a question, but it felt like one. I searched for something to say, but he beat me to it. "So, are you in charge of the decorations, or is this just your excuse to avoid talking to people?" His grin was disarming, and I found myself smiling despite my nerves. "Someone has to make sure the shepherds don't topple over." "Ah, noble work," he said with mock seriousness. "Saving the nativity, one figurine at a time." I laughed, genuinely this time. The sound surprised me. It wasn't often I felt this light, but as I stood there, talking to him, I couldn't shake the feeling that Jordan had returned with more than just stories of life beyond this town. He'd brought a challenge, a reminder of everything I'd never dared to be. The raffle table was tucked in the corner of the hall, beneath a garland-draped archway. I didn't think much of it when Dad told me to help out there, but when Jordan sidled up beside me, rolling up his sleeves and grinning, I knew this wasn't going to be easy. "So, we're partners in crime now," he said, picking up a roll of tickets. "How scandalous." I forced a chuckle and focused on sorting the prizes, an assortment of baked goods, gift baskets, and hand-knit scarves from the church ladies. My hands felt clumsy, my thoughts scattered. Jordan's presence was magnetic, impossible to ignore. We worked side by side as attendees trickled over to buy tickets. Jordan charmed everyone, effortlessly drawing smiles with his quick wit and easy laugh. I stayed quieter, deferring to him. It wasn't that I didn't want to talk. I just didn't trust myself to say anything that wouldn't betray what was running through my mind. "So," Jordan said during a lull, leaning closer, "what's it like being the golden boy of the church? You must love the spotlight." I snorted, shaking my head. "Hardly. It's just part of the deal, I guess. Part of the deal." He raised an eyebrow, studying me. "Sounds like a pretty raw one." I shrugged, trying to keep the conversation light. "It's not so bad. The events are nice. People care about each other here." "That's one way to spin it," he said, smirking. "But you can't tell me this is where you want to be forever." I didn't answer right away, focusing instead on a tangle of ribbon that didn't really need entangling. He waited, patient but probing. "What about you?" I asked finally, deflecting. "You're the one who got out. How's life in the big city?" His grin softened into something more thoughtful. "It's good. Busy, chaotic, but freeing. You'd like it, I think." I laughed nervously. "I don't know." I'm not sure I'd fit in. Why not? He asked, his tone sharpening just slightly. Because of this place. Or because you've convinced yourself you don't deserve more. I stiffened, unsure how to respond. He wasn't teasing anymore, his words cut to close. Before I could find an excuse, he shifted the conversation. For what it's worth, he said casually, coming out was the best decision I ever made. Scary as hell, but worth it. The air between us thickened. My heart pounded, though I wasn't sure if it was from admiration or panic. He said it so easily, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. For him, maybe it was. I opened my mouth to respond, but a voice interrupted. Well, if it isn't our worldly traveler, Mrs. Langley said, her tone dripping with faux politeness. She was one of the church's oldest members, and her sharp eyes darted between Jordan and me like she'd uncovered a secret. Still, living that colorful lifestyle, are you? The implication was clear. Heat flushed my face, and I dropped my gaze to the table, fumbling with the tickets. Jordan, on the other hand, didn't miss a beat. Absolutely, he said with a bright, unapologetic smile. Wouldn't trade it for anything. Mrs. Langley's lips pursed, but she had no retort. She moved on, muttering something under her breath, and the moment passed. I risked a glance at Jordan. He was calm, composed, completely unbothered. The tension I felt didn't seem to touch him. If anything, he looked proud. Doesn't get to you? I asked softly. What, her? He shrugged. She's got opinions. So do I. I nodded, though I couldn't imagine being so unshaken. Watching him, I felt a pull I couldn't name, part envy, part something deeper. He was everything I wasn't. Bold, fearless, free. And for the first time, I let myself wonder if I could ever be the same. The event had dwindled to a handful of lingering guests, their laughter and carols muted as the night deepened. I slipped outside, needing the crisp air to cool the heat rising in my chest. The nativity scene stood bathed in golden light, serene and untouched by the chaos of my thoughts. My hands gripped the edge of the wooden manger as I stared at the painted figures, trapped. That's how I felt, boxed into a role I didn't choose, unable to escape the weight of who I was supposed to be. The soft crunch of boots on snow pulled me from my spiraling thoughts. Thought I'd find you here, Jordan said, his voice softer than it had been all evening. He stopped a few feet away, hands tucked into his coat pockets. The warmth in his gaze made it impossible to look away. I needed a minute, I muttered, my breath clouding in the icy air. You looked like you could use one, he said, stepping closer. You okay? I shook my head, the words spilling out before I could stop them. I'm not okay, Jordan. I haven't been okay for a long time. My voice cracked, the weight of my confession pressing on my chest. I feel like I'm living someone else's life. Every day, I try to be what my father wants, what this town expects, but it's not me. It's suffocating. Jordan was quiet for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then he moved closer, his voice low but steady. I get it. Believe me, I've been there. You spend so much time trying to please everyone else that you forget who you are. I glanced at him, unsure if I wanted to hear more or run from the truth he was offering. He took a breath, his words careful but firm. But you don't have to live like that. You don't have to bury yourself just to make them happy. His hand brushed mine, and I felt a jolt of warmth. I didn't pull away. It's easy for you to say, I murmured. You left. You've got freedom. I don't even know where to start. You start by being honest with yourself, he said, his voice gentler now. The rest will come. The weight of his gaze held me in place. My heart pounded as I searched his face, feeling something shift inside me, something I'd tried to bury for years. Jordan. He didn't move, waiting, letting me close the distance. My breath caught as I leaned in, our faces inches apart. The glow of the Christmas lights softened everything around us, and for the first time, I felt like I could breathe. Our lips met, tentative and unsure, but the connection was electric. It wasn't just a kiss, it was a revelation. The world seemed to fall away, leaving only the two of us under the twinkling lights. Then I heard the unmistakable creak of the church door swinging open. I froze, my stomach dropping. Over Jordan's shoulder, I saw the figure of Mr. Palmer, one of the elders, standing just beyond the doorway. His eyes widened as they landed on us, and for a heartbeat, none of us moved. Eli, Jordan whispered, his voice steady but quiet. I pulled back, panic gripping me. Mr. Palmer lingered for a moment, his expression shifting between shock and disapproval, before retreating inside without a word. The door clicked shut behind him, leaving us alone again. My voice failed me as I stepped back, the cold seeping into my skin. I can't. Jordan reached for me, but I turned and hurried toward the hall, my heart racing. I couldn't face what just happened, couldn't face what it meant. All I knew was that everything had changed. I leaned against the hallway wall, my breaths coming in short bursts. The faint hum of conversation and laughter from the remaining guests echoed around me, but I barely heard it. My thoughts raced, my pulse pounding in my ears. What had I done? What would Mr. Palmer tell my father? My hands trembled as I pressed them to my face, trying to steady myself. The soft sound of footsteps drew my attention. I didn't need to look up to know it was Jordan. His presence carried a weight I couldn't ignore, a force that simultaneously calmed and unsettled me. He stopped a few feet away, giving me space but not letting me retreat entirely. "I'm not going to apologize for what happened," he said, his voice low but firm. "But I need you to hear me." I swallowed hard, still unable to meet his eyes. He waited, patient as ever, until I finally looked up. His expression wasn't angry, but it was serious, his usual playfulness replaced by something deeper. "You can't keep living like this, Eli," he said, each word deliberate. "You can't keep hiding, pretending to be someone you're not. It's tearing you apart, and you know it." I opened my mouth to respond, but no words came. He was right, and I hated that he was right. I hated how much I wanted to believe him. "You deserve more than this," he continued, his voice softening. "You deserve to live your life, not the one your father planned for you, not the one this town expects. And you can, but you have to choose it." His words hit like a blow, knocking the air from my lungs. He stepped closer, his eyes searching mine, and I felt the weight of his sincerity. "I care about you," he said, almost a whisper, "but I can't make this choice for you, and I won't stick around if you're too afraid to make it for yourself." My heart sank as he turned, his shoulders tense, and started to walk away. Each step felt like a thread snapping, unraveling something I hadn't even realized I was holding onto, and then I heard it. The choir began singing Silent Night, their voices rising in harmony from the hall. The familiar melody, one I'd heard every Christmas for as long as I could remember, wrapped around me like a bittersweet memory, but this time, it felt different. It wasn't just a song, it was a moment, a mirror showing me everything I'd been running from. I looked at Jordan's retreating figure, and for the first time in my life, I understood what was at stake. Not just my happiness, but my freedom, my truth, my chance to finally be myself. I couldn't let him leave. Not like this. I didn't think. I couldn't. My feet moved before my mind caught up, and I found myself rushing down the hall, past the glow of flickering candles and the fading laughter of the remaining guests. "Jordan," my voice cut through the stillness, sharp and raw. He stopped, turning to face me, his expression unreadable. For a moment, I froze, the weight of everything pressing down on me. But then I remembered his words, his challenge, and the weight wasn't fear anymore. It was freedom. I closed the distance between us, my breath visible in the frosty air. Without thinking, without hesitating, I reached for his hand. His eyes widened slightly, surprise flickering across his face as I intertwined my fingers with his. Behind us, the warm light of the hall spilled out, and I knew people were watching. I didn't care. "Stay," I said, my voice trembling but steady. "Please." There was a pause, a heartbeat of silence that felt like eternity. Then his face softened, the corners of his mouth lifting into a smile that warmed me more than any fire ever could. "About time," he said, squeezing my hand gently. I turned my head, and sure enough, several attendees stood in the doorway, their faces a mix of confusion, curiosity, and something I couldn't quite name. The air felt heavy with unspoken judgment, but for once, it didn't crush me. I stood taller, holding onto Jordan like a lifeline, and felt the tightness in my chest begin to loosen. The murmurs started, whispers carried on the winter breeze. I met their eyes briefly, then let my gaze settle back on Jordan. He was calm, unshaken, his confidence grounding me in a way I hadn't known I needed. "A Christmas miracle," he said softly, his grin widening. "I didn't think you had it in you." Neither did I, but in that moment, I realized something important. This wasn't just about Jordan. This was about me, about finally taking that first step toward the life I wanted. The life I deserved, The church bell rang, its deep, resonant chime signaling midnight. Christmas Day, the sound washed over me, a reminder that this was a beginning, not an ending. Around us, the world felt still, as though it had paused to acknowledge this moment. I turned to face him fully, his eyes reflecting the glow of the lights behind us. "Thank you," I said, the words heavy with meaning. "For waiting, for pushing me, for being here." He didn't respond with words. He didn't need to. His hand in mine, his steady presence, was answer enough. And as we stood there, together under the silent, star-filled sky, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: hope. Have you ever been caught in the act of trying to make out with your gay lover? Share your experiences in the comments section. Don't forget to like and subscribe to this channel. We are Pride Stories Unfiltered, your #1 pride.